Hello and welcome to the Autoblog Podcast. I'm Greg Migliore. Joining me today in studio is Reese Counts.
Good morning. How's it going?
It's going well. Chicago Auto Show. The Windy City. It's windy here, but lots of cool stuff. Let's jump right in.
Yeah, we're back in Detroit, but we got a few people on the ground in Chicago. As of recording, the show's still going on, so check out everything on the site. But yeah, a lot of interesting stuff. There wasn't a lot of new stuff, but there was a lot of variants and special edition models that we saw at the show. We were talking about this offline. Toyota probably had the biggest presence there, but there wasn't a whole lot new, but they probably had some of my favorite stuff on the ground there. They rolled out some new TRD stuff, refreshed TRD stuff, refreshed Tacoma, and my favorite thing from their lineup, the Land Cruiser Heritage Edition that celebrated, I think it was like 70 years of Land Cruiser or 60 or something like that. It was just like a special edition model, but I think it just looked really cool with the retro badges and the kind of cherry red paint, deep coloring. But yeah, what'd you think?
Big fan of the Land Cruiser. We'll get to this in a little bit. I gave the Land Cruiser Heritage Edition some points in our editor's picks. I just really dug the vehicle, and I thought they did enough things to it to make it like a legit special edition. You know, the wheels were cool. I think it was like a burgundy paint, like you said. There's also another sort of pearl coat you could get to. I didn't see pictures of that one, but I would assume it'll look pretty good. Gold or bronze, wheels, some stitching, and then the badge. I mean, the script Land Cruiser badge, awesome. Loved it.
Yeah, I don't always love special edition models or heritage edition models. It's especially like the limited edition stuff doesn't mean anything to me. I've got no attachment to that, but this might be one I would actually consider buying if I was in the market for it. I don't know. It was a lot of little touches that kind of appealed to me, more so than some of the other like anniversary models we saw at the show that we can talk about soon. But yeah, the rest of Toyota's lineup was okay. The refreshed Tacoma looks interesting. I don't love the current Tacoma. I've got some problems with the brakes and the transmission tuning, so I'm hoping maybe they kind of refine that a little, because it has the potential to be a really great truck. The refresh looks good. It's got a new infotainment system, which is one of the biggest issues that Toyota has across the board, but they're finally adopting Android Auto, and I think Apple CarPlay as well. Something they've desperately needed, but yeah. And then there was TRD stuff, including a RAV4. Yeah, what'd you think about that?
So it's interesting. Like we were saying, Toyota, I think overall had the strongest portfolio of just stuff they brought to Chicago. Lots of cool stuff, heritage editions, TRDs. The Tacoma is a refresh, but it's a very light refresh. They did it in some meaningful ways, like, definitely upgrading the infotainment and some of the interior pieces. I guess the grills are different, they say. I couldn't tell you how, but they are. But I mean, give them credit. They had a full portfolio effort here in Chicago, and I think, give them credit for that. The TRD stuff I really like. I think, the RAV4 TRD I wanted to like more than I did because I like the RAV4 and I like TRD. So, put that together, that sounds like a really tasty sandwich, but it's also like, if you dig into what the RAV4 TRD actually is, to me, you're just paying more money for a RAV4 Adventure, which is probably all you need for a RAV4.
Yeah, we were talking about this a little off the podcast at our desks earlier. We decided to kind of pause on that so we could talk about it here. I was really disappointed by the RAV4 TRD. It seems like they really phoned it in on this. RAV4 already kind of has a, I don't want to say off-road model, but a slightly like more capable model with the RAV4 Adventure. It's got a little bit better ground clearance, slightly more aggressive bumpers, but the TRD just kind of builds on that with some different suspension, and that seems to be about it. There's some visual changes. It's got the TRD grille with the Toyota name instead of the logo, but There's no skid plates. There's not a different engine. The powertrain is completely unchanged. It's got all-wheel drive with like torque vectoring, but there's nothing really different from the standard car except for like some suspension components. But the fact that it's a TRD and doesn't have skid plates is really kind of like strange and kind of like I would say borderline unacceptable for a product badge with TRD. You expect a certain level of performance with it, especially the trucks. I mean, you look at the Tacoma, you look at the 4Runner, even the Tundra TRD, the TRD Pros, they're like genuinely capable stuff. And then you look at the Tacoma or the RAV4 TRD, and it's just this. It's a RAV4 adventure with different. I was really, really disappointed by this thing.
I'm with you, like exactly, like total lockstep. It's just the RAV4 is good, TRD is great, and then to me, it's just like the buildup and then the disappointment. It's really hard to get past. Like, oh, this could be really awesome, and then you sort of look at the details, and it's just like, okay, it's not so great. So. But again, I like the RAV4 a lot. We had one in the office a couple months ago. Really liked it. It's very competitive. I like what they've done with the the design and just trying to make it more of an off-road vehicle, or at least styled vehicle. It really is, it's an upgrade over what they had before. I think it's going to get some new buyers for them. It's going to be more competitive with like Jeep. It kind of looks like a Jeep if you ask me from certain angles, but yeah, man. I mean, to me, this was just kind of like a swing and a miss here. Like, throw some skid plates on it, do a few more things. But yeah, I mean, especially when you've got the rest of your TRD lineup on display there in Chicago. They did add the Sequoia to the TRD lineup, which I think is an awesome move. The Sequoia is very strong. It's really old, but it's a really strong vehicle for Toyota. And to me, it's a natural thing. Like, are most people going to take the Sequoia off-road? Of course not. But add some TRD stuff to it. People might buy it for the looks. And the Sequoia is fairly legitimately capable off-road. Whereas to me, it seems like people might be more likely to take the RAV4, at least to some more like dirty, dusty, muddy places. Whereas the Sequoia, sure, it's a, battle cruiser of an SUV. I think it's mainly going to be signed up for like, hauling your kids and stuff like that. So,
yeah. So outside of the Silverado, the Ford F-Series, and the Ram, the RAV4 is the best-selling vehicle in America. And it was kind of getting pretty old, like with the outgoing model. So Toyota really didn't have to make this one as good as it actually is. Like you, I dig the RAV4. It looks good. It's nice to drive. It's good and practical inside. So I don't know how much actual owners are going to care that their TRD is not as capable as we want it to be. I'm just frustrated that it's not that different from the Adventure. It seems like a half measure when they could have done something, just spent a little more time on it and made it like genuinely capable when they didn't.
Well, let's just look at our friend the Sequoia again.
Yeah.
It gets skid plates over the front suspension, TRD roof rack, get some running boards. You get some stuff over the skid plates, cover the oil pan too. It's just, this is like common sense when you're going to outfit an off-road vehicle, do it this way.
When every other TRD model has these things, I just don't understand why they wouldn't do it for the RAV4. Even if it's going to be like a very niche product. I don't get it. But
yeah, we should probably move on because we're using the RAV4 as a little bit of a punching bag, and we really like the vehicle and we really like the TRD line. It seems like this one fell a little bit short. But overall, props to Toyota for a strong effort in Chicago. And this actually kind of brought into focus for me how strong their SUV lineup is right now. I mean, you've got the smaller crossovers. You've got, the RAV4, which, like you said, Reese, is such a good seller. Then you've got these like big monstrous, like the Sequoia, the Land Cruiser. These are like as big and capable as like, Jeeps or Yukons or, Tahoes, things like that. So, I mean, to me, they have one of the strongest sport utility vehicle lineups in the industry.
Yeah, it seems like they've got a crossover for every segment. They've got the CHR, the RAV4, Highlander.
Forgot about the Highlander. But
I know,
yeah.
and it's another old one.
And then there's the 4Runner, which is like from 1973 or something. But
they all sell, and like it's
and I love driving all of them too.
We might knock a lot of like some of the tech, like the infotainment. Toyota's infotainment is like unacceptably bad. That said, they are finally changing it. They announced a lot of stuff. Chicago, they're updating it, but yeah, for the most part, I still like driving them. The the 4Runner's got a lot of plastic, but it's still fun and it's still super capable. And I think the things that people want from these, they do well. And they're finally like updating it. I'm sure we'll see a new Highlander soon enough. Probably the same goes for Land Cruiser eventually, but I think the Highlander's the next thing we'll see from Toyota. Probably, maybe sometime later this year, but that's pure speculation on my part.
Yeah, Reese with his insider sources.
Yes.
So I think we've kind of obsessed over the Toyota lineup. Let's move on a little bit to Ram and its multifunction tailgate. One of the spotlight reveals of the Chicago show, which kind of speaks to how mediocre some of these reveals were. But this is a cool tailgate. Takes the fight to the GMC Sierra, and it's configurable. It can do a lot of different things. It's cool.
I love the Ram. It's my favorite of the big three right now. And
agreed, totally.
It's really great inside and really like comfortable and well appointed. But this is super practical too. Even with the last generation model, I'm a big fan of the Ram boxes. The little for those who don't know, that they're kind of little storage compartments on the outside of the bed. They've got little drain holes, so if you want to stick ice and some drinks and stuff in there, you can drain them at the end. You can lock them, but when I go to the grocery store, if I want to like throw something in there, it's lockable sealed storage, and I can stick my groceries in there and not have them rolling around in the back seat, which is something that's kind of a problem with a lot of pickup trucks. And now they've got this cool tailgate. It is different than the GMC Sierra Multi-Pro tailgate, which got a lot of attention last year. I'm curious to actually try it out myself. It's kind of a mix of traditional I think the closest thing we can equate to it is the tailgate on the Honda Ridgeline. It's very similar, except it's kind of it articulates in two places rather than one. So it's more of a barn door kind of offset, but
I think it's a 60-40 split, and it swings open, which is cool.
Yeah, it swings open. It swings down like a traditional tailgate. I'm curious to try it myself because I think, in theory, it's probably going to be a little more usable than what the Multi-Pro tailgate on the Sierra is. That's a neat tailgate, but in my opinion, it's kind of a novelty.
Yeah, I agree with you. We had that Sierra a while back, and we had this conversation in the parking lot, and you showed me what it does, and I was like, okay.
They're like, yeah.
That's what it does? That's all it does? Yeah. Looks cool.
I can't see myself using it very often. If I had a Sierra with the Multi-Pro, I could see myself doing this just because like it seems easy to access, and if you're reaching into the bed, it allows you to get a little closer than currently. And that's something I liked about the Ridgeline that I definitely used, and something I can see myself using with the Ram, especially as tall as trucks are. It's a lot harder to like reach over into the bed than it used to be even 10, 15 years ago. So yeah, I was kind of excited. It's a new, interesting feature on a truck I really, really like. So, one of my favorite things from the show.
Let's actually shift gears here a little bit and talk about the Subaru Legacy. Arguably one of the most important vehicles at the show. It's the 7th generation of the Legacy. This is a legit new model. It doesn't look that different, so I think that's in some ways why maybe this car didn't get as much coverage as it could have. It was very popular on our site. The interior looks really good, according to people there, and just looking at the pictures. And that's always been a weakness, I think, for Subaru, is some of their interiors, especially on the lower spec models, they're too plasticky. The infotainment is taking a long time to get sort of where it needs to be. Even like the leather and stuff, you get in there and you're like, oh, this is rough. But, you know, they've been able to overcome that with like affordable all-wheel drive, symmetrical all-wheel drive. Now they're branching out into hybrids. But to me, this is just sort of like a really smart way to just continue to evolve the Legacy. They did the things they had to do. It moves to the new global platform that basically all of their lineup is going to be on in some form or another. And then they added a turbo engine, Turbo 4, that makes, I don't have it in front of me, but nice, like I would say 260 horsepower.
I think that's about right, yeah.
And it's called the XT trim. So to me, this is a really smart play for them. It's a solid execution. They did all of the things they needed to do to make the Legacy stronger, more competitive. And yeah, sedans are not dead, clearly.
Yeah, I wasn't as enamored with this as a lot of other people were. The interior does look nice. I want to see it in person. I'm still kind of on the fence about it. Based on what I've seen in the Accent, it's probably going to be great, but I don't think the photos are doing it very much justice. The Turbo 4 is going to be great. I am going to miss the sound of the old flat 6 because you could get a Subaru that kind of sounded like a Porsche, which was kind of cool.
I think you got to recalibrate your brain, though, to really think that's a Porsche sound. But I agree. It sounded good.
But I think the most important thing about the Legacy is what it previews for the Outback. Because sedans are still selling, not in the volumes that they were years ago. But the Outback is probably going to come sometime in the next year. We were talking about this online. I think our contributing editor, James Riswick, mentioned that like the last generation Legacy came out in 2014 and the new Outback came out in 2015. So this Legacy is a 2020 model. So we're kind of expecting an Outback for 2021. And the Outback, for those that don't know, is pretty much a lifted Legacy wagon. I mean, that's really what it is. And if they can get this interior in there and they can get the new powertrain in there, I think the Outback's going to be really solid. As it is, the Legacy looks cool. Of course, it's got all-wheel drive. The turbo engine's probably going to be nice, and it's going to probably be pretty comfortable. And yeah, I agree. Subaru interiors historically have not been very good. They seem like well put together, but there's like a lot of like, I don't know, this very hollow, tinny sound with certain things. I know something I always notice when I close a door on a Subaru, it always feels a little thin and a little cheap. And I think I feel like that's improved with the Accent and the new Forester. So I bet it's going to be
the Ascent, you mean, right?
Ascent, not Accent. Sorry, guys, it's not a Hyundai. But yes, the Ascent. So it's gotten better, and I think they're taking a better approach to everything. So
yeah,
I'm sure it's going to drive great. I want to see this thing in person before I make my final judgment.
I think your point on the Outback is a point very well taken, because that to me is definitely one of their bread and butter vehicles. I think it's actually my favorite Subaru. To me, I would take an Outback all day over almost anything else they make. I really like it. I think the styling for this most recent generation, it got a little weird. I would almost go back to like the 2010 sort of era styling. To me, that was a little cleaner, a little simpler. And that's what I'd like to see them do maybe is, you know, we go forward with the next gen of the model. But if they could get this interior and these powertrains in there, which it sounds like they're going to do, that's a great play for a new Outback. But yeah, let's move on to, so we had some milestones in Chicago. Miata 30th. It was basically orange with, you know, some nice options standard. Okay.
You were not too hot on this.
So I love the Miata and give it in orange. Great. That's fine. But I don't know. The staff was in love with this car. And I feel like it was a little bit of almost like confirmation bias. Like everybody loves the Miata so much that they just like saw this and then voted for it in our highlights, which we'll get to in a second. But I mean, hey, I love the Miata, but it's just like, okay, it's an orange car.
Yeah, it's a really nice shade of orange, but like it's orange and there's like nothing else different to it other than some badges. Now you could say the exact same thing about the Land Cruiser Heritage, but the badges on the Heritage, they threw some retro badges on there. I mean, if they'd done the same thing with the Miata, maybe I'd be a little more excited about it. But yeah, it's an orange Miata. And that said, the initial allotment's already sold out within like 5 hours. So great. Customers seem to be loving it. But yeah, I'm kind of with you. I'm just like, I love the Miata, but I don't see what's so special about this one.
I would argue that the Land Cruiser went a step farther with
Oh,
like the wheels,
I
with
agree.
the interior trim. And so, yeah, Mazda definitely is playing the 30th anniversary card. And I think Toyota's playing like the 61st anniversary card here. It goes back to 1958. But to me, they actually both, I think, are trying to channel that same spirit of like, you like this car and maybe you're thinking of, buying a new one. And I think in the case of the Miata, it just becomes a collector's item. But for the Land Cruiser, I think it's more of a play where people, maybe it's time to get a new Land Cruiser and you get that like nostalgic feel and you want to sort of maybe capture that in your next purchase, which I think is cool because, there's not many people who are buying a Land Cruiser who are like, probably like super like, hey, cutting edge, like, hey, like this is definitely an old school car, SUV. So I don't know. I think it's a smart move to try and capture that nostalgia for both of these products. I just think the Land Cruiser went a little bit farther and is a little more substantial. I totally digress and, went down the rabbit hole there, but yeah.
No, I agree. Like I mentioned with the Land Cruiser, usually I don't care at all about special edition models. I dug the Land Cruiser, and I do not care about this Miata at all. I love the Miata. I'm a Roadster guy. The RF's cool, but it's an orange Miata. So cool. Glad they're selling well. People are buying Miatas, and as long as people buy them, that's really great stuff. I just don't care. Yeah.
Speaking of 30th anniversaries, the NSX had a 30th birthday party in Chicago. It's where it all began. They did the NSX there in 1989. Must have been a heck of an auto show in 1989.
So I'm glad I'm back here in Detroit. I've been traveling a lot, and I get to hang out with my wife and dogs. The biggest thing I'm jealous of is that both Mazda and Acura had some like old cars, like old Miatas and old NSXs on the stand. And I would have loved to get some like photos and poke around in those. That would have been really cool. I saw some, they had like I don't know if it was the original concept or what, but they had a original early NSX in red with a black roof. You can check out some photos on the site.
Great photos. Check them out.
It was cool. It's cool when they roll out like classic or heritage models like that, especially on anniversaries. That's probably the coolest thing about the Miata, and it was cool to see Acura celebrate the same thing with the NSX.
To be fair, Mazda actually brought out a car. Acura didn't do that. They just brought out the old car.
Right.
And then there's a photo on our site that says, please join us for a 2 p.m. champagne toast. It's in the background of the new NSX and the old NSX. Man, that alone makes me wish I'd gone to Chicago. Hang out with look at that car, swill some bubbly. That sounds pretty good to me. But they essentially just did like a history lesson and threw a party, which that sounds okay, I guess. I don't know why I'm going to give them such a positive look, but that sounds pretty good. I really like that old NSX.
I think I was happy about this because they didn't even try to like make some like half-hearted attempt at an anniversary model. They're like, let's just celebrate like 30 years of it.
Also, 30 years is not an anniversary. For humans, it's a milestone.
Right.
But for cars and anything else, it's like 25, 50, 30. Okay.
Yeah. It's the coolest thing. Like I said, the coolest thing was they rolled out some concepts. They released some old images of some early concepts and sketches and stuff, which was all really cool. But yeah, I was more excited about the NSX, even though there wasn't a car on a new anniversary edition on the stand. So
it also gives us a great opportunity here to reflect on like just how revolutionary the NSX was in 1989 and throughout the 90s. This is when Ferrari was making essentially junk. Like at that point, the future of the company was in doubt with the death of Enzo Ferrari. And then there was that kind of like transitional period until Luca di Montezemolo came in and really set them on the right path. Lamborghinis were borderline undrivable at that point still, unless you had your racing license. Acura stepped up and really created a car that, was, like I said, revolutionary in its design, its engineering, its styling. It was amazing. It did all these different things. It did it was better than than what the Italians and other exotic car makers who at that point I'd say their development and their production was like stuck in the 60s. You know, Acura came in and just really turned the world on its ear. You know, I believe, let's see, NSX stands for New Sports Car Experimental.
I think that's right.
And that sums it up. You know, I mean, every buff book, like, just totally fawned over this car. It was a car that actually sort of made Automobile Magazine in many ways what it was, because they just really, you know, planted their flag on how great the NSX was and then really backed it up. So I mean, good move, you know, throw a party, celebrate your history.
Yeah, I think I honestly believe like every modern sports car owes something to the NSX. It really was like a game changer. It proved you could have this like amazing, like advanced sports car, mid-engine, like all aluminum, like really cool stuff. That was still like well put together and reliable and like comfortable. Ferraris were not like, they were fast and they looked great, but they were not very well built. Lamborghinis, like you said, were like just very complicated and like not like, it was just hard to get in and out of. Even stuff like I think the Porsche and the Corvette had to really like get better about like ergonomics and build quality. I mean, Porsches have been well built, but you get in like a 964 or a 930 or 993, the late 80s, early 90s Porsches, and they're not that much different from what they were doing in the 60s. There's no cup holders. There's like not very much storage. They hadn't advanced it a whole lot. Acura proved that you can have all this power and have this capability and this performance and still like be a good sports car. So it's hard to understate how revolutionary this was 30 years ago. And yeah, like you said, I'm glad they're celebrating that.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. So let's do some blocking and tackling here and just break down the Silverado. Heavy duty was there. The Ram chassis cab was there. The Ford Super Duty was there. To sum it up, Chevy and Ford had new gasoline V8s, very big ones. Some new just like trailering and hauling features. Very important vehicles. Yeah, not a ton else as far as like, hey, let's really get fired up about these. These are big, capable trucks that do their jobs. Chicago Auto Show is generally where we see these. But yeah, you know, kind of sort of boring but important, I would say.
I do want to mention, I don't love the looks of the Silverado HD, and I definitely don't love the interior. The fact that the Silverado HD can tow 35,500 pounds is very notable. I mean, everybody else is this Super Duty and the Ram are within like a few hundred pounds of the Silverado, but I just think it's an extremely impressive number, even if most customers that buy these won't come close to using that capability. 35,500 pounds, guys. I mean, that is crazy.
That's wild. You
So
could tow a battleship or something.
yeah, so that's about all I'll say about the Silverado, but I think it's worth noting.
I actually really like the looks of the Silverado HD. I think there's a little more differentiation between that and the 1500.
For sure.
And I think that's a good thing. I think it's wild as far as just how like big those headlights are. The grille looks like a 1950s train or something. You got these like kind of creases in the fenders. I mean, I dig it. I think in real life, it's going to be wild. Maybe I won't like it as much, but I will say this, the Trail Boss for the 1500, seeing that in real life, I really liked it. And that sort of changed my opinion of the 1500, just lineup and its design in general. So I'm going to sort of withhold judgment here. Like initial impressions, good. And I think it's a positive sign. We'll see. I mean, I think it looks good, but again, wait till we see it in person.
I will say I have seen it in person. I was at the facility where they're building this.
Right, you went up to Flint just Tuesday, right?
Yeah, earlier this week in Flint, Michigan. I was there for like the full line launch, and I think they had one of every trim that they're going to have. And so the initial photos, and I saw an early preview of this like September, October of last year. I saw a full-size mock-up, and it was not very great. But then seeing it in different colors, seeing it in different trims, it's very color and trim dependent. And I think a lot of vehicles are like that now. So I still don't love it. It does look better in certain colors. So wait till people see it in person. It's better. So if you don't like the photos, you might like it better once you get some eyes on it, like in the flesh and like outside of like the initial press photos. So yeah.
Cool. Let's break down the winners, right?
Yeah.
Editors' picks. We vote on these for every auto show. Like we said, sort of slim pickings here for Chicago, a lot of trim levels, and, even the new stuff was like not all that different or didn't seem to stand out, but also still a decent auto show. So if you're listening to this, these are up on our site now, so check it out. You'll see some more comments from the editors, all of those great pictures. So yeah, without further ado, in 5th place, the Toyota RAV4 TRD with 26 points. This is the SUV that Reese and I spent probably 10 minutes ragging on. Guess what do we know? The rest of the staff seemed to like it. In 4th place was the Ram tailgate. First time in recent memory a tailgate, probably ever, has won a position in our editor's picks.
Yeah.
3rd place, Subaru Legacy. This is actually what I voted for with the most points for my first place votes was the Legacy, 41 points. Distant 3rd place, actually. Reese, you and I are not in alignment with the rest of the staff here. We sort of ragged on the Miata, but it's a strong 2nd place with 62 points. Mazda Miata, 30th. And then in 1st place, the Volkswagen Jetta GLI, 68 points. And we actually haven't even mentioned that.
Yeah, it's funny. We've talked about the other 4 cars on our winners list. We saw the new Jetta last year at Chicago, and we saw the Jetta GLI this year, and it's basically a sedan version of the GTI, which is going to be cool. It's got the same engine, which is like 225 something horsepower, I think 258 pound-feet of torque, 7-speed dual clutch or 6-speed manual. It looks okay. I don't love the face of the GLI, but it's probably going to be really good to drive. It's got revised suspension. I mean, it's based on the same platform. It's going to be a 4-door GTI. But again, it's not a new model. It's a performance variant. It's a trim variant. It's a variation of a model we've already seen. And that seems to be the case, except for the Legacy on our winners list. It's the only new model. I'm excited to drive the GLI, but I'm not like excited about it itself. The best thing I'll say about it is, I probably have to see it in person, poke around in the interior, but I can make the argument it's probably a really decent budget Audi S3. You're not going to get all-wheel drive, but you're going to get the power. You're going to be able to get a manual, which you can't get in the Audis. So if people are in the market for a S3, which is 5 years old now, I think it's a 2014 model.
Yeah.
A GLI might be worth checking out. If you want the sedan, if you don't want the hatchback of the Golf or the GTI or the Golf R, the GLI might be like a budget Audi. So that's cool. But other than that, it's cool. It's going to be probably fun to drive. But again, it's a variant. So.
I think the GTI angle here is what got it so many votes. You and I actually were on the low end. A lot of our editors gave this thing a lot of votes. So, I mean, I'm excited to drive it. I think it looks pretty good. The 6-speed manual, I'm sure is going to be great. We know and love that power plant, so that's a good thing. I mean, yeah, it's fine. I guess for me, when I look at this and I look at all the different like trim levels and special models, this to me is cool. And, like I said, I did vote for it and I'm excited to drive it. But I guess to me, this didn't stand out as much as it just didn't stand out that much that this was the clear winner at the show. I think just it got consistent points, and that's how we voted for it.
Yeah, I think everybody on staff liked it. I don't know if anybody loved it, but I didn't see the full breakdown of the voting. But I think like you said, it got consistent points, and that's kind of what pushed it to the top.
Some people did love it too. I mean, it actually, so I'll give you a really quick refresher here. The way we vote is you can vote for up to 5 cars. No one car could get more than 10 points. So generally, if you want to really give something, a winning vote, you give it 10 points or something towards that. And it has to have debuted at the auto show that you are casting your vote for. Other than that, it's pretty simple. You get 25 points to distribute. So when I look at this, there's there's 9s, there's 7s, an 8. It's just across the board, people gave it high marks. And then you and I and a few others kind of, fell lower on the spectrum, but it also was the only thing that got votes from everybody. So everybody, all the editors gave it some points. So
because I think I've made this point pretty clear. I wasn't super excited about anything at the show. So I gave 5 vehicles 5 points each, and kind of leveled my playing field. So not one car was outstanding for me. So, I mean, I'm glad the GLI won, especially over like the Miata, even though it was looking at the points, it was pretty close. But I was far more excited about the GLI than the Miata 30th. So, yeah, cool. I'm glad people like it. I'm looking forward to driving it. It was just not a very exciting reveal for any auto show. So the fact that it's the winner for this is kind of indicative of what we saw at Chicago.
Yeah, Mazda 30th, I think we already covered that, but I will say this. Almost everything we said about the NSX, you could apply to the Miata 30th. Right. Great way to mark, great car that we all love. I think the voting here broke down simply because like Autoblog editors, staffers love the Miata, and you give us a special edition, it's going to get a lot of points. I can't wait to drive this new one. If we get a bright orange one in the press fleet, we'll see. Legacy, 41 points. I actually think that one would have gotten more points if it had more striking design. I don't think they did a lot to it, and I think a lot of people didn't realize that this was a new generation of car. And I think a lot of people also didn't realize that, perhaps didn't make all the connections with like, what this means for future products. Maybe I'm, extrapolating thoughts that aren't here. People just didn't like it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I actually thought based on its overall, like how significant of a vehicle this is and what they did to it, it should have gotten more points. But hey, what do I know? Ram tailgate. Hey, considering enough people voted for the tailgate of a truck to get it in fourth place. Yeah, I don't know what that says, but people really like this tailgate. So there you go. And then the RAV4 TRD, people apparently were not as worried about its lack of skid plates as we were. 5th place, editor's pick for the RAV4 TRD. I guess the thing with that one is, again, it's the actual authentic off-road capability that I would have liked to have seen here. And then there were other TRDs that I would have voted for. I would have voted for the Sequoia or just the Tacoma refresh, which I thought were more significant than this RAV4 TRD. But hey, other people felt differently.
Yeah, I'm genuinely surprised that the Taco didn't get more votes from the rest of the staff.
It is a pretty light refresh, though.
But I think it's an important refresh. But
yeah, given the climate of the mid-sized truck segment, they needed to do these things, and they appear to have done them well.
Yeah, I think that's what excited me about it. Obviously, not everybody else agreed, and it didn't make our winners list. But yeah, I'm looking forward to driving it. I'm looking forward to driving most anything that we saw at the show. Just nothing really excited me.
Cool. Speaking of driving, we should probably move on to talking about the stuff we've been driving. Yeah, let's kick things off with the G-Class, the Galanda wagon. We had the G550 in the fleet last week. I enjoyed it. I took it home for a weekend. I drove it through a blizzard, and you spent some time in it too. So it was cool.
Yeah, I love the G-Class. I love the old G-Class. I understand some of the criticisms. It was an old vehicle, and it felt old, and it was not very practical. The sole cup holder up front was this little pop-out net. It was kind of cramped inside. I never found a really comfortable seating position. but I didn't care. The G-Class is so cool. It's so well built. I honestly don't know if there's a vehicle I've ever driven that feels as solid and like premium as a G-Class, even if it is kind of an old truck. It looks good. It sounds good. Just the G-Class is so cool. And with this new generation, we saw it debut, I think, last year at Detroit. I was kind of worried they were going to ruin it by making it quote unquote better. So I was very cautious going into it. And it's good. It's really, really good. It still feels like a G-Class. It's got the solid build quality. It's got the looks. It's got the sound. But it's a little better. It's a little wider, so it's a little roomier inside. It's a lot more practical. It improves on everything that was wrong with it before without losing any of the charm. It is as good as I like hoped it would be. And this is just the 550. We've got a AMG, the G63 coming in a week or so we can kind of come back on that one. But I didn't spend very much time in the 550. You had it for quite a few days, but
yeah, that's my fault. I took it for a weekend, and then I think we had like a snow day, and I left at noon and took it again.
Oh, I can't blame you. And I'm gonna try to get in some time in the 63 because my short time in the 550 was I was just super happy about the fact that like. I still don't love the looks of the headlights. It looks a little cross-eyed to me. Outside of that, this thing's rad. It's still as cool as ever. It's got all the looks and sounds, but yeah, it's good. They didn't ruin it, and I'm really happy about that.
I think I agree with you. They nailed it. This is a tricky redesign. They did have to make it better because the old one, the way it drove, your 2019. You're getting to the point where you're only going to get the hardcore, like really rich people who want to buy this thing and are willing to accept those compromises. Now I think they've redone it for a new generation of people who will say, this looks cool, I love it, but also I could keep it on the road and not steer it into a ditch. The dimensions are a little bit like it's just a more agreeable vehicle.
It's a little wider and it's got a little bit longer wheelbase. I don't know how much longer it is overall. But the width helps shoulder room, adds a little more room in the console for the cup holders. The longer wheelbase means you can scoot the back seats back a few inches, give some more back seat room. People that buy the G-Class don't care about any of this. They buy it because it's a status symbol and it's cool. And
it's a Rolex on wheels.
They do not care that it's kind of miserable to drive and it's got awful steering and awful brakes and it gets terrible fuel economy. But you look at the sales and like Southern California is the biggest market in the US. And I asked Mercedes rep about this. It is the only model where the AMG outsells the standard version. The 63 and the 65 outsell the G550.
It's a status symbol.
This is one of the cars that people walk into a dealership and like slap their money down. They're like, I want the most expensive one you have. And I want it in an obnoxious color. And I want it with a loud exhaust. And I think that's awesome. I love that this thing exists. I don't care that it's flawed. It is so cool. I think it might be one of the coolest vehicles on the market because it's not cheap. It is like you said, it is a Rolex. You can get a Casio for $15 and it's a watch, or you can go spend several $1,000s on a really, really, well-built machine, and people are going to argue why would you spend that much on a watch? Why would you spend that much on a truck, a bad truck? Because it's a status symbol, because it's so well built, and because it's just cool. I love the G-Class every time I get inside one.
I agree with you, but I'll admit I'm sort of predisposed to I already like this kind of vehicle. Yeah. I would seriously consider owning a 4Runner. I like the Tahoe and the Yukon. I like the Jeep Wrangler. The Gladiator is also like a thing I would really like. So obviously different price points, but just I'm okay with this driving experience. It's totally fine with me.
all the body on frame stuff. Like I still like I like the Armada. I like the QX80. Pretty much everything. They're big V8s. They still feel like trucks. But they feel
The Land Cruiser.
the Land Cruiser, of course. We could sit here and name out like everything in this class. And
This could be our next Comparo, actually, maybe like summer or early fall. I'm thinking we do this, the Dinosaur Comparo.
It's great.
Let's do it. This sounds great.
I think you and I like these maybe more than anybody else in staff. But yeah, like you, I'm kind of predisposed to liking this, and it's as good as I hoped it would be, which is near and dear to my heart.
The 550 I thought was actually a very capable V8. You don't need the more powerful engine, but that's fine. You don't, like you said, the AMG is essentially a status symbol.
Oh, yeah.
AMG, when you put it on this vehicle, I think it's definitely more of just an escalation of the luxury experience versus performance on like almost any other Mercedes. The 4MATIC system's great. I drove it through a straight blizzard. This was last Monday. And it was obviously it's super capable, and it's so confidence inducing. To me, I was almost glad it snowed because I was like, great. I'm not just driving this on like dry pavement and 65-degree weather. It's like, let me try this thing out. And, how often do we have the opportunity to go find an off-road course or something and, truly test these vehicles? So I was pretty excited about that. I like the V8 a lot. Door handles, awesome.
Yeah, I was kind of curious about this. This was, let me look at the window sticker on this. This was about $140,000, just shy of $140,000 with options for a G550. And it didn't have keyless entry. And I was kind of like disappointed with that. Like, I don't mind pulling out a key fob, but when I'm paying $140,000 for a vehicle, I knocked Porsche for the very same thing on this. We had a GT3 last year that was about the same price, and it didn't have keyless ignition, much less entry. Like, you still had to put a key on the dashboard, which sounds small, but when everything else at this price point like kind of has it,
and almost every other car in the industry has these things.
We like going down to like $30,000 vehicles. Like, a lot of them come standard with keyless entry and keyless ignition. So when something costs 5 times that much and still doesn't have it, it's borderline unacceptable. So I shot a message to Mercedes asking why. I'm like, hey, why does the new G-Class not have keyless entry? They said it will not fit with the push-button door handle because the Mercedes engineers realized that the sound of the door locks and the door handles was so important to the appeal of the old one that the new G-Class uses the exact same part. It's the same door handle, so that sound and door lock is the very, very same. That's cool. I still wish this had keyless entry. Surely they could have figured out like a small button like you see on like some of the FCA products or like our Kia Stinger where there's a button added to it rather than like a touchpad. But yeah, it's like my one complaint about this thing. It's cool that it's like uses the same mechanism, but I don't know. I wish it had keyless.
I'll say this. I would trade the keyless for that sound of the push button door handles. Like, I agree with you. It's unacceptable. And it seems like they should have found a way to make it work. But just for the engagement of opening a door like it's, 1973 and the sound it makes when you close it, I don't care. I think it's awesome. I love that. But to your point, they should have found a way to make this work.
Even if it was like a proximity thing. Like, my dad's like 90s Corvettes, like, had proximity keys where they would unlock if you were just like walking up to it. And surely they could have like done some sensor in there to like, I don't know. This is just Mercedes and it's some German engineering thing, but it's cool that it sounds the same. It is what it is. So they didn't change it. And that's probably my biggest complaint about the G-Class.
Speaking of German engineering, BMW X5, we had that in the fleet, also right around this time. Very nice vehicle. I think the most controversial part of this was the steering, though. So
I think you had it over the weekend, and then I had it a couple nights this week. I didn't mind the steering so much. I think the things that people care about in a crossover like this, the X5 does well. It's quiet. The tech is really good. I like the interior. The inline six is really, really sweet.
Solid engine.
Yeah, I think you can get a V8 in it with a X50i. This is just the turbo inline six. I think it makes 300 and something.
330 something maybe, somewhere in there.
Looking at a review, it looks like 335 horsepower and 300 pound-feet. It's got the ZF 8-speed auto, which is probably the best like traditional automatic out there. I didn't care about the steering all that much. I don't think customers are going to care about it. I think it looks good. It's probably the best iteration of this like big grille that they're doing. It's appropriately proportioned on this car. The X7, it looks like way oversized. The Refresh 7 Series,
Series, it looks cartoonish.
Yeah, it's. But here it's large. But seeing it in person, I think it looks proportional. But I dug it. I think it drove well. I think it was comfortable. I don't know if the infotainment system debuted on this, but I feel like it's the first time I've used this iteration of it. And it's slick. Looks good. It's sounds. It's quick to maneuver. The instrument cluster is all digital, and it looks cool. There's a lot of configurable stuff on it. So yeah, I don't know. I dug it. I took it one night, and then I had a family member coming in town, so I was like, I guess I'll take it another night and see out. She likes the back seat. She was comfortable back there. I wish it had like a heated steering wheel, or if it did, I couldn't find the control for it. But yeah, it's I dug it. I think I actually like it better in the Audi Q5. I'd have to drive it against the XC60 to see if I really liked it better than that. The Volvo interiors are just so good. And I think I like the exterior design of the Volvo better, but there's pretty much everything in this class is like really, really solid. And it's a tough class and a very important class. It's a 2-row midsize luxury crossover. It's not a 3-row. That's what the new X7 is coming out for. But I think it's good. I think it's the things that people care about in this class. I think it does well. Now I need to drive the new Mercedes GLE because that's the other like new thing in the class, and I have not had a chance to get in that. And I think there's a possibility that the Mercedes is probably better. It's got better interior. Powertrains are probably comparable, but yeah, I like everything in this class. I don't mind crossovers at all, and I think this is a really, really solid entry. I'm inclined to agree with you. It's really big too. Like the X5 is getting monstrous, and that's fine. That's the way the world works at this point. Really like the powertrain. The engine's great. That ZF 8-speed, very, very good. I like the design. A little more complicated than like BMWs used to be, X5s used to be, but still going in the right direction, I think. Grille looks pretty good. Inside, I think sort of echoes the outside, where there's a lot more curves and angles than we used to see in BMWs. I'm okay with it. It was a pretty nice place to spend time. It was quiet. Decent amount of room in the back seat, decent amount of room in the cargo hatch. So it, like to your point, it does all the things an SUV in this class should do. And it's still got the split hatch with the small tailgate.
Yeah, that's cool.
One of my favorite things about it. That and Range Rovers. I don't know why I like it so much, but the fact that it's still got it, I think is pretty cool.
I'm not sure where I would rate this because I have not driven the GLE either. The Q5, the Q7, I actually haven't driven those recently either. So, I'm not quite sure where I'd put this in the pecking order, but I think overall it's a solid product. Like I said, the looks of the powertrain, the interior, all the things that matter are good. I brought up the steering because we had a pretty like people in the office did not like this steering. I think you might have been out at one point when some of our other editors were just really ragging on this thing. And they thought it was too light. It was too connected. Then the in-between phases, it was kind of weird. I actually think if this didn't have, the spinning propeller on the grille or on the hood, people might not even notice it. But because it's like BMW, we start to think about the steering, and we're like trying to like rationalize how this is somehow related to like, you know, a 90s, you know, BMW sedan in some way. And it's like, that's not what this is. I think they're trying. I thought the steering felt a little funky. Like it was super light at times. And then that transition to like getting more feedback depending on the maneuvers was a little weird. So I do agree with that, like sort of part of our editor team that was not loving it. But then I also come down on your side where ultimately people aren't going to really care that much. It still steers pretty well and it's not that offensive. And I also took a look at a lot of our competitors, went back and read a lot of different first drives. A few people like legitimately agreed with that like angry part of the steering, but some people even liked it. So steering is so subjective, and I think that's really where we land on with the X5.
I'll make one last point on that. I think for the X5 X40i, which is the entry-level engine, I believe on this is the Turbo 6, I don't think those customers care about the engine or the steering that much. When the X5M eventually comes out, because there will be a version on that, that's when I'm going to start like actually caring about the steering. For this car, I don't care. It's fine. It's acceptable. I think the customer that's buying this particular version of the X5 is not going to care, and I think that BMW knows that. Yeah, we're all equating it to that classic BMW steering feel, but it is what it is, and crossover owners are not all that concerned about it. They want something quiet, they want something comfortable, they want something that looks and feels good, and for the most part, that's it. That's X5 is solid, so yeah.
I think that's actually because we're enthusiasts, we tend to sort of overinflate that part of the BMW, like, you know, consumer group. There's a lot of people that just want a nice, expensive luxury SUV. They know BMW's the brand that sort of fits, you know, what they're looking for, and they go for it there. And we tend to over-index on maybe the, you know, I don't know, I'm making this number up, but let's say it's 30% of like hardcore BMW enthusiast buyers who have had a bunch of M3s and stuff, and then they need an SUV. And we tend to I'd say, index on what they think versus just, you know, guy needs a premium crossover, goes with this.
Yeah,
so.
And I think for a premium crossover, I think this does all the stuff people want. So, yeah, I look for, if you want steering, wait for the X5M or some M performance package. That's where it's going to improve. But for this one, it's fine. I think it's totally acceptable.
So we should probably spend some money.
Yeah, some of our favorite parts of the show.
All right. This comes from a writer named Keaton, and he or she is hoping to be featured on our Spend Our Money. Well, hey, here you are. Welcome. So just got out of college, looking for a used car with low mileage. Currently driving an '09 Ford Fusion, but it's starting to show its age. Looking for a sporty car that can survive a 60-mile commute on Midwest, specifically Indiana roads. So this actually would be good for Joel. He's from Indiana. A person who refuses to switch tires out for winter tires. I don't know. You might want to start thinking of doing that. At a crossroads with the search. Crossroads of Indiana. I think that's on the license plates, right? In Indiana. Crossroads of America. Anyways, looking for some suggestions. Thanks for reading. Hope this gets featured. Well, hey, let's have at it.
Yeah. So, all right. You said you are not going to switch to winter tires. I think it's a bad idea, especially if you want something sporty. Because I would not recommend any rear drive car if you're not going to wear winter tires. So, that said, let's look at front wheel drive and all wheel drive. Greg had some stuff we wrote down ahead of time. The GTI, of course, is the go-to. And I think probably the best thing in this for you. It's front wheel drive, so it's going to do okay in the snow, even with all season tires. It's nice, it's practical, it's fun. Everybody knows the GTI and why the GTI is great. If you can find an Audi A4 all-road, that's going to be a good one too. It's not going to be as sporty as some of the other stuff, but it's still really good to drive. You get the lifted wagon, and you get all-wheel drive, so if you're not going to put winter tires on it, that's a big boon. those are my two picks, GTI or A4 All-Road. So, yeah.
Solid choices. I would also say GTI because when you're looking at something that's sporty, fun, enjoyable, we always land on the GTI, it seems like. But it is a front drive car. So if you're not going to do the winter tires, this at least means you could drive it in winter and not be too freaked out because there's a lot of snow in Indiana. So to me, that's a solid choice. The Civic Si, I think you could enjoy that. Subaru WRX, also good. That's also all-wheel drive. So symmetrical all-wheel drive, you could get some good traction there. Focus ST, perhaps. But the way I would actually land is either the GTI or the Rex. That's how I would spend my money if it were me. Try to get something that's sort of capable but also fun for all seasons.
Yeah, anything in that $25,000 to $35,000. I know you're looking at used, but anything that was new in that $25,000 to $35,000 price range, either front or all-wheel drive, whether it's GTI, Civic Si, WRX, like anything like that, it's probably going to be a good pick. It's going to be comfortable, it's going to be practical, but you're still going to get a little bit of fun. Yeah, just if you're not going to switch winter tires, don't go rear drive. It's just going to be, it's not going to be fun. It's going to be hard to drive in the winter. You're going to have a pain to get out of snow or ice. So look for front or all-wheel drive. If you're determined not to get winter tires, do that. So my votes are GTI or Audi A4 All-Road. Yeah, it's there's a lot of options, especially in the used market, but really consider getting winter tires if you can, but if not, stick with these.
Cool. Well, hey, thanks for writing and listening, Keaton. Really appreciate the note. Let us know how it all works out. We always like to have some updates from the Spend My Money segment. And that's all the time we have this week on the Autoblog Podcast. Thanks for listening. Be safe out there. If you're inclined, please give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We're also now on Spotify, so check us out there. You can also listen to the podcast on the Autoblog YouTube channel. Send us your Spend My Monies. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.